He picked my brother up and threw him up against a wall, like all the way across the room. He was a small kid, but he was my hero that day. And he held him up against the wall and he just kicked him over and over and over and over. And he was so small. So I ran away that day. It's difficult to say who I was before the because I was so young when it started taking place. My parents decided to divorce. I was 5. So immediately after divorcing my father, she married who we would come to call the warden. The reason that my brothers and I, and eventually my mother, decided to call him this is because this is how he ran our home. The grooming process and the began almost instantaneously. My first vivid childhood memory is that I was playing hide and seek with my brothers. I ran down the stairs, and I don't know if I said that they were bugging me, but there was a room off of the living room, and the warden laid in that bed, and he said, "Get under the blanket, they won't bother you here." I felt something behind me, something odd. I'm a child, I don't have words for it, but it was him, and he was a rat, and he was rubbing himself on me. I said, "What is that?" He said, "Oh, it's a snake." And I began to call out for my mom because I don't like snakes. And he covered my mouth and he said, "Oh, it's a nice snake, it won't hurt you." And that's one of my very first childhood memories. Following the next couple of years after that encounter, I remember he would always push to give me baths. He would put me to bed. And when he would put me to bed, he would molest me. It progressed from digital to oral. And then at one point in time, when I was 7, I remember him saying that he was going to put his in my, for lack of a better term. I mean, how else are you going to make a 7-year-old understand? And I was terrified. He had pressured my mom to join a Tuesday night bowling league. And I knew that on this particular Tuesday, that was the night that my life would forever be altered. I remember him telling me that it had to be a secret, that my mom would hate me, my mom wouldn't understand. And it was a lot of pressure, like that I would be disrupting the family. And initially, it was him grooming me, like, you know, extra presents and the princess treatment. I was the only girl. There were four boys. So it was just, you know, oh, well, she's a daddy's girl and, you know, gets special gifts and treatment. Now, as I got older, all of the anxiety, and even as a child, you instinctively know this is not right, this is wrong. And you don't want to keep secrets from your mom. By 3rd grade, I was developing an ulcer. I was always sick, you know, somatic symptoms, psychosomatic headaches, stomach aches. I was always in the nurse's office. So instinctively, I did know that it was wrong, but it wasn't violent by nature initially. As I got older and I began to fight back a little bit and grow angrier and angrier, that's when the violence became more prevalent. So when I was 7 and I was told that, I begged my mother and begged her to go with her bowling, and I didn't want her to go, and I actually told her verbatim what I had said. He's going to stick his in my. There was a big discussion, and what I want people to understand about pedophiles is the fact that they are very charming and charismatic. When they say a wolf in sheep's clothing, that is literally what they are. They can take a story and spin it, and it doesn't matter what the context. So my mother was led to believe that I was making it up because I wanted to go with her and I was just throwing a temper tantrum, and this was supposed to be her time to herself. And, you know, she's got 5 kids. This is her escape, I guess, or getaway. And he had convinced me to say that I had heard that on the school bus, and it was from a high schooler, and that I had just heard it and I was making it up and I just wanted to go with her. So she didn't believe me. And it was like he picked different forms of abuse for each of us. So mine was primarily, my older brother was primarily physical. My younger brother was more emotional. He didn't have a name. He called him all kinds of awful names, but never by his actual name, and always devalued him and degraded him and belittled him. Whereas my older brother, you know, we're all very small, and he was a big man, and he was very physical with my older brother often. And then as I got older, if I didn't comply, my brother would be beat. When I'm 12, my brother was like, something's fishy, because every house that we lived in had a door from the bathroom into their bedroom. Every chance that he got to me, he would take. It didn't matter who was around. He was pretty brazen with his. At one point in time, I was in a state park. It was also a state park with a swimming area. So my brothers and I and my cousins would all go to the swimming hole, and he would swim with us, and he would me under my swimsuit in front of all of these people, but they didn't know because it was a murky pond, it was just a pond water. I felt really trapped. So when I was 12, and it became opportunistic. My mom would go to the grocery store. My mom would go to my aunt's, or she would go to my grandmother's. And anytime she would leave the house, I would be expected to go in that bathroom and meet him in his bedroom. And my brother was like, this is odd. And he decided he would peek inside. And in doing so, he is still haunted by what he saw, and I'm still haunted by what follows. Following my escape from the bathroom, he confronted the warden. He said, SOB, I know what you are. I seen you rape my sister. And it was like this blind rage overtook him. He picked my brother up and threw him up against a wall, like all the way across the room. He was a small kid, but he was my hero that day. And he held him up against the wall, and he just kicked him over and over and over and over. And he was so small. So I ran away that day. And when my mom got home, my brother told her what had happened, and the warden told her that it wasn't true and that my brother had lost the remote and gotten smart about it, and that's why he beat him. So I walked 5 miles to the next town that day, and then I realized I didn't have anywhere to go. So when I was taken home, we got notified that a neighbor had reported the. So when I was younger, I had a lawnmower, and I would go to lawnmower races. And at one of these particular lawnmower races, a neighbor lady had witnessed, I think he was giving me a piggyback ride, and he slid his hands up my shorts and then flipped me around in front of him. But she waited 2 years to report that. And within that 2 years, there was a family meeting between all of the women in my family. And as an adult, I am now aware that I don't know a single woman in my family that has not been by a family member or someone close to them, going back generations, like to my great-grandmother. The women decided the best course of action would be not to leave. They said, don't leave them alone together. Them, as in like I felt I had done something wrong. That lasted about 2 weeks. I just really grew up thinking that she hated me. Why else would she leave me in that environment? When she was told time and time again, she didn't hate me, she was just a weak person. My brothers and I all have struggled with that, among other things. My younger brother is still in the grasp of being bitten by that snake. My older is in remission, but still struggles. That's so important, that shift in mindset for survivors of assault. Changing from the victim mentality to the survivor mentality is so important, because our circumstances don't have to define us. They don't. We lived them. It was horrendous, but we don't have to. I always say you can revisit the past, but you don't have to unpack your shit and live there forever. Like, it's okay to revisit it, but don't live there. Don't reside there, because that's not where you are now. You have to stay present, and you can choose to heal, but it is a choice that you have to make every single day. Healing is every day. At 15, I had decided I would rather not be here anymore than to ever allow him to touch me again. And I voiced that. And in doing so, a huge physical altercation broke out. He punched me in the face and knocked me through a wooden door, and I had smuggled a cell phone. I called the police. I let them know. They come, and I was not separated from either parent to let them know what had happened. They told the police officers that I was messing with a boy and mad because they didn't want me to have a boyfriend, and I was just throwing a temper tantrum. And the police officer told me that as my parental figure, he had the right to discipline me after he punched me in the face. That really solidified my distrust of law enforcement. After that, I went upstairs and I swallowed a whole bunch of it. He had been giving me the for a couple of years, but it wasn't to the point where like I needed it to cope. The eating disorder became that. It became my best friend. And then it would be like he would bring me the and I would just be drinking it in my room, by myself. I was just really unhappy, and there was some self-harm. When he was sentenced, when he was arrested, there were 119 cases of child just various different ones, but so 5 to 7 touching, oral, 7, and then that progressed to, and that was so traumatic for me. The pain associated with that was unimaginable. Like, it was just terrifying. And then it would be, I couldn't do it, and he would become angry, and then physical, because he was mad at me because I was a child and I couldn't I couldn't do what he wanted me to do. The lead detective did tell me that my mother was a victim as well. So I think a lot of the times if she had said something, she would lose a couple teeth, or it was mostly when he physically assaulted her would be in private though. He was also on the fire department. He was also so helpful, a helpful neighbor, and which in the same breath, the neighbors would see the police at our house frequently. When I turned 18, I brought a boy home and I wanted him to meet my mom because I was serious about him. He later became my first husband and my oldest daughter's dad. Great guy. The warden came on court. Remember that rage that I talked about that that overcome him when my brother confronted him? It was like staring into the eyes of the devil. Like his eyes would just turn black, and he behaved like a jealous boyfriend. I was trying to leave the premises and he wasn't allowing me. He was trying to confront this boy. He's 18, barely a man. And my brother was home on leave from the military at this time. And he was beating up his vehicle with a bat and throwing cinder blocks at it and trying to anything to get him away from me so that I could safely leave. And when I did safely leave, he got in his vehicle and followed me and chased me. There was like a highway chase. He pulled off in front of me and was like, hit me. Like just crazy cuckoo bananas. I should have ran him over. We did get away, and then I told my mother, I said, if you don't leave him, any future grandchildren that I have for you will not be associated with you. She and I and my brother all had to have restraining orders because he was stalking us. The prosecutor at the time, for whatever reason, chose not to pursue charges, not to file charges, even though there were two open cases, the 5-year-old at the time and mine. And there are emails in that case I sent you, the case file, from Child Services. Are you going to pursue this case? And he says, oh, I probably will. The game. Well, it wasn't a game. My life was not a game. The other prosecutor who took office and found our case file and chose to pursue charges later lost her position, and he reobtained office. I filed a formal complaint against that prosecutor with the Chief Justice. I said he was negligent. Due to his negligence, my was left to harm other children for over a decade. And that Chief Justice said that as the prosecuting attorney, it's at his discretion which cases he chooses to pursue. I think that's wrong. I think that needs changed. I don't think it's fair that they get to play God with people's lives. However, I did get a message from him a couple months ago on Facebook, and it said something. It was a friend request, that's what it was. And I said, this is either a spam account or your balls are way bigger than anybody gives you credit for, because I was not quiet about not wanting him to take office again. I even made a radio ad because he was just so negligent and his ineptitude was undeniable. And he said, oh, it was I think he called it like a pocket dial. And I'm like, it was a friend request, you toad. So within those 10 years, I spiraled. I hit my rock bottom. I was at my rock bottom when the lead detective called me. I was slowly killing myself I had become a functional alcoholic. The minute I would get off work, I was going to the liquor store. I wasn't even making it home. So I had lost my job, lost my driver's license. My husband had convinced me to take some time for myself and stay home and just be mom. I don't know how I got lucky enough to have this man in my life, but he is either a sadist or relentless in his love for me. I don't know. He's a glutton for punishment. I don't know how he's put up with all my shenanigans for 10 years, but he has. And then I got a phone call out of the blue, and it was the lead detective on my case, and she said, hey, we found your case file and we would like to pursue this. Can you testify? And that was just a switch flipped in my brain. I got the closure that I needed somewhat in that case. I put the bottle down, threw everything I had into raising awareness and spreading education, because I wanted to be the advocate that I needed as a child and I didn't have. So we went to trial. It was a 2-day trial. First day I take the stand, instant panic attack. I can't breathe. I did not expect that reaction. In 2017, I had ran into him at a gas station because, like I said, he was free. The restraining order had expired quite some time ago. I was working on his trash route. He was a garbage man, and he was in his garbage truck. I was getting gas. I had my daughters in my vehicle, and I looked down and I looked up, and he was there and they were there, and it was awful. Luckily, a friend had pulled in behind me, and she looked at me and she said, get your shit together, your babies are watching you. He looked at me and he looked smug. Like, I would be happy to see him, and that was infuriating. So I hopped up on the side of his truck and I spit right in his face. I call my handle on TikTok as Taking Back Tuesday because Tuesdays, inevitably, I would be. Sentencing was on a Tuesday. I took back my power and my Tuesday that day. And then the rest of his sentencing was on my dad's birthday. So initially, the jury convicted him of 5 life sentences. And then that following August, this was in June, that following August, the judge finished the sentencing. He was arrested in 2021 and he was sentenced in 2022. So he was in jail that entire time. There was no bond. I say, yes, I got closure. Yes, I got justice. The jury convicted him. I wanted him to admit it. I wanted him to take accountability. And that's something he never did.